Good evening, everybody. My name is Councillor Lilly. I'm Chair of the Planning Committee, and I'll be chairing this meeting this evening. Welcome to everybody here, members of the public, councillors, visiting councillors. To begin the meeting, there are a few matters of housekeeping. Action in the event of an emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, so if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and to the car park behind the town hall in St Ronwell Street. This meeting is being live streamed to the council's YouTube channel and will be available after the meeting. Please would speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone, and would participants please mute the microphones when not speaking. Introductions. Members of the committee will introduce themselves now, starting from my left.
Good evening, Councillor Sam McCarthy representing Shrub End Ward and Vice Chair for this evening's panel.
Councillor Mike Hogg from St Anne's and St John's, subbing for Councillor Helen Chua this evening.
Good evening, Councillor Mark Corey for Wivenhoe Ward, subbing for Councillor Lynn Barton this evening.
Councillor Adam Fox representing Old Heath and the Hythe, substituting for Councillor McLean this evening.
Councillor Kirkby Taylor for Castle Ward, substituting for Councillor Nesson.
Councillor Martin Warnes, Beard Church Ward.
Dennis Willits, Lexstone and Braeswick Ward, substituting for Councillor Tate.
Councillor Roger Mannion, Tiptree Ward.
Councillor Roger Buston, Prettygate Ward, substituting for Councillor Nigel Chapman.
Councillor Jackie McLean, Marksend Low Ward, and apologies for being late.
Thank you, Reverend. And tonight we have planning officers Simon Cairns and Nadine Calder. Also present is Martin Mason from, if I get this right, Essex Highways or Essex County Highways. Same thing. Thank you. And Democratic officers, we have Robert Carmichael and Matthew at the back there doing the live stream. And we have one speaker already, Councillor Buston.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Not wishing to be pedantic or anything the like, but looking at members of the Planning Committee and Planning Committee substitute members, for the sake of the record, I suggest that we need to make sure that you've done the training, you can be able to confirm that, because it's not on the list and people might look on the list.
I can confirm that I have done the training and I have emailed Democratic Services to confirm that.
And I can confirm that you've already done a planning committee last week, twice, in fact, so we're all satisfied with people here tonight, and straight in as a new councillor, straight in there on the planning committee. So yes, we have members of the committee may use electronic devices to access meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use them discreetly. Set them to silent and do not use voice or camera flash functions. We may have a break at 8 o'clock, subject to the items remaining. There are toilets on every floor in the building and an induction loop in this room. This is a quasi-judicial committee which makes decisions based on material planning considerations following the laws of the land and policies of the council. If the committee is minded to refuse an application, members will use such considerations and evidence that will stand up in a court of law. The material planning considerations are listed in the committee's agenda. We've already heard a long list of substitutes. We'll take note of those. We have a late one, of course, which is Councillor Kirkby Taylor for Councillor List. She's stuck in traffic, so thank you for stepping in the last moment for that one. Urgent items. There are no urgent items. Declarations of interest, councillors. Any declarations of interest? Councillor McLean.
Is there any chance
Can we organise? Well, I think that makes sense.
Just a bit of information I'll get, but I just need to have it in
Okay,
front of me.
okay, well,
please.
shall we adjourn for 5 minutes and we? Yeah, we'll adjourn.
Thank you.
Oh, welcome. Is that Will? Oh, Will Bramwell to the rescue. Is that okay, Councillor?
Yeah,
Yep,
perfect.
thank you. Yeah, sorry, declarations of interest. Councillor Warnes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, could I declare a non-pecuniary interest in that I live locally to the particular application, around about 2.5 to 3 minutes away. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Jackie, you've got your microphone on. Thank you. If anybody else has an interest that comes up during the meeting, you can declare it there and then. So we have your say. If anyone has a petition they wish to present to me on any of the items on the agenda this evening, please do so now. Nothing there? No, we're fine. It should be noted. Sorry. So it should be noted that we have changed the public speaking arrangements. They've been amended to allow speakers on both applications because it is slightly different tonight. We have a Site A and a Site B on the same application, basically. Item 6, there are no minutes to be approved at this meeting. Then item 7, have your say, and we'll go through the applications one at a time. And basically, there is two, but it's one, so to speak. So we have 7.1, and it's 213530, the land west of Peldon Road. We have someone speaking against, Simon Doherty, and we have public for Andrew Ransom, and we have someone online, remember the public, I think, Mark Jackson online. And we also have visiting councillors, Judge Kevin Bentley tonight, who's the ward councillor, I think. And then we have 213531, land adjacent, Borley's, Peldon and Aberton. And we only have one person speaking for, I believe, Mark Jackson. Yes. So, and they'll be referred to tonight as Site A and Site B. So there's hopefully no confusion, but that'll be explained, I believe, by the planning officer as we go through it. So we can move on to the start of the meeting, I believe, because there are no on block and other items. So, Nadine, over to you, please, to present the application.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry we got there in the end. So today we are looking at two different allocations, but they are forming part of the same allocation in the emerging local plan. So they're two separate applications, but there will be a lot of repetition if we were to discuss them individually. So I'm going to take you through the applications individually, but I'll always make sure that you have the context of the site where you can see both of them. So to start off with, this is as you can see, it's just a Google Maps extract, but it shows you Site A and Site B. So this is Peldon Road, and we've got Site A, which is the larger scheme on the west of Peldon Road, which extends to this area here. And we've got Site B, which is the smaller site on the eastern side of Peldon Road, and that's this site here. So first of all, I'm going to show you Site A. That's the application site, and the application is in outline with all matters except access reserved. It is for up to 50 dwellings, of which 30% will be affordable. It also includes a pick-up and drop-off facility for the Elangho Primary School, and it shows access for cars and pedestrians, which forms part of the application. This is the existing site, which shows that there's just a number of trees and hedgerows on the site. This plan shows the development area, so everything in white can be developed, and the land down here in green is reserved for the green infrastructure and sustainable drainage. This drawing shows you the footpath that is proposed. So the site starts here and extends down here. There is a pedestrian footpath proposed in the northern corner of the site, and a new footway would be built across the western side of Peldon Road, linking up to the existing footway network along to the north of the site. There's an existing public footpath here that leads to the school, and a dropped curb would be provided in front of it where pedestrians have to cross the road and link to the footway that exists up here. There's some photographs of the site. This is the existing field access, which is proposed to be closed. This view is to the north of Peldon Road, showing the boundary treatment along the western side of the road. And then finally we've got some photos of the existing site. That's the centre of the site, and here is towards the north with the closest residential properties being Toad Hall, Will-o'-the-Wisp and Abbeywood, shown here in the centre of the site. And that leads us to the second application, which is the smaller site B, which is outlined here in red. Site A is on this side here. Site B is again in outline form with all matters except access reserved. It is for 5 dwellings, and it includes indicative site plans and housing types, which I'm going to show you in a minute. This is the block plan, which shows where the access is proposed, so this forms part of the application. This is the indicative block plan showing how 5 houses could be fitted on the site, and these are indicative house types. It's worth noting that the council does not agree with this layout. It doesn't form part of the application, but it's just to reiterate, we don't think this is how it should be, and an informative has been added to say that a more appropriate layout and housing mix will have to be provided, because these are all relatively large houses, and we will be looking for smaller houses on this site as well. So this is indicative only, which if this application was approved would not form part of the planning permission. And again we've got some photos. This property is Borley's, which is the existing property on the site. The application site lies to the north of Borley's. This is again a view up Peldon Road. This location here is site B. This location here will be site A. This is the boundary treatment further up to the north with residential properties over here. And then again a couple of photographs of the site itself. Beyond this boundary here is the playing field. And again this is the northern boundary of the site with housing beyond. I'm going to leave this up just for everyone's reference. So, as I said, both applications are in outline form. All of the proposals comply with the emerging local plan policies, and as a result of this, subject to conditions for both of them and a legal agreement for Site A, the recommendation for both of them is for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Dean. And now moving to the public speakers. Speaking against the application is Simon Doherty, please. You have 3 minutes and 2 minutes. Bell will warn you have 1 minute left after that, so thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Simon Doherty. I'm the Chairman of Aberton and Elangho Parish Council, and my talk today will actually cover both sites, Site A and Site B. Most residents do not wish for any new houses in the village. It is recognised that some development will take place, so it is our duty to make it as good as possible for new and existing residents. The two sites are located on Peldon Road. The large site to the west, Site A, and the smaller site to the east, Site B, the latter being directly adjacent to Elangho Community Primary School. After the consultation some years ago, the Parish Council and residents had expected the eastern site would be used for safe parking for the school, which will alleviate the considerable parking and access issues which have seriously affected the roads adjacent to the school for years. However, the applications place the car park in up to 50 houses on the west site and 5 houses on the east site. The proposed car park is in the wrong location. Its use would increase the risk to children attending the school, as they would have to cross a busy road at an uncontrolled crossing where the traffic measurements provided show vehicles travelling between 39 and 53 miles per hour. Increasing the risk to school children, parents and guardians is not acceptable. To quantify this risk, 78 of the 102 families, that's 80% of the families attending the school, many with multiple children, are not resident within the village and therefore could be exposed to this additional risk. Consequently, parents will not use the car park on the west side as proposed and will continue to park in the roads adjacent to the school, thereby sustaining the difficulties experienced by existing residents. Councillor Lee Scott, the ECC portfolio holder for highways, viewed the road and crossing site during his visit to Aberton on the 31st of March, when he expressed concern. In addition, and importantly, the briefing pack states that there will be only 8 parking places provided. This would be completely inadequate provision for the 78 families who travel from outside the village to the school daily. However, I have had further discussions with the head of Elangho Community Primary School. These reveal that there is a site within the school grounds which could be used for safe drop-off and collection of pupils arriving by car. Subsequently, I spoke to the planning officers about this, and this is reflected in paragraph 1614 of the report, where it is proposed for officers to explore this option further with all interested parties. The Parish Council supports this action. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Speaking for the application is Andrew Ransom, please. And same for you, Andrew. You have 3 minutes. The bell go after 2 minutes.
Good evening, Councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to speak in favour of this outline planning application for 50 dwellings on land to the Peldon Road, Aberton. My name is Andrew Ransom, and I'm the agent acting on behalf of the applicant Mersey Homes. We're pleased that this application has been recommended for approval by the Planning Department, and a committee report is thorough and clearly explains the reasons behind the recommendation. The proposed scheme seeks to secure planning permission for the Council's own site allocation, which is set out in Policy SS1 of the Emerging Local Plan. On the 19th of May, the Council received the Inspector's final report on the examination of the Colchester Local Plan. The allocation of the land to the west of Peldon Road was found to be sound by the Planning Inspector, and I understand that earlier this week the Local Plan Committee recommended that the local plan now be passed to the full Council to consider for its full adoption. Therefore, Policy SS1 can be given significant weight in the consideration of this application. Each of the criteria set out in Policy SS1 will be met by the application. Namely, up to 50 dwellings will be delivered. The application is supported by a transport statement that demonstrates that the development meets highway safety as confirmed by Essex County Highways, and appropriate mitigation measures can be achieved where necessary. Provision has been made for a drop-off point for Elangho Primary School. This can either be on-site at Peldon Road, or it could be at the school itself if that proves to be more beneficial. And provisions also been made for new footpaths connecting the site to the school and the village. Furthermore, this development will deliver 30% affordable housing and in the region of about £500,000 in planning obligations to go towards various infrastructure projects, such as education, parks and community buildings. We note there were some objections based on density levels. However, the residential development area covers about 2.25 hectares, and as pointed out in the committee report, this would amount to a development density of 22 dwellings per hectare across the site, which is low and appropriate for this location. The proposal has been subject to detailed discussions with key consultees before and during the planning application process. There are no technical constraints that prevent this development from coming forward. This is a well-considered planning application that has given consideration to all the technical matters and seeks to establish the principle of development, thereby providing the framework to deliver the Council's local plan site allocation for the site. I therefore hope you can agree with your planning officer and support this proposal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And public 4, I believe, is on site B. Mark Jackson, please.
Good evening,
Oh, he's online,
members.
sorry. So you have, good evening, Mark, and you have 3 minutes. The bell will go after 2, meaning you have 1 minute left on that. So, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. Thank you for inviting me to speak. I am instructed by the applicant in this matter. I am a chartered town planner. Outline planning permission is sought for the erection of 5 houses. The application includes details of the access. Matters of the appearance, landscaping, layout and scale are reserved. The application follows on from the adoption of Section 1 of the local plan and the Colchester Borough Council Section 2 local plan submission document. We agree with officers that Section 2 of the plan has very significant weight in the emerging policy context, and this planning application is consistent with both Section 1 and Section 2 of the plan. The application submission accords with the emerging policy and allocation SS1, Section 2 of the local plan. The application includes a pedestrian access from Peldon Road to the grounds of Elangho Primary School. We understand the school is yet to finalise whether they require the access. However, we again confirm that the applicant is very willing to provide the link. Alternatively, the applicant is prepared to provide a pedestrian access to the future footway network. The officer report to the committee suggests the imposition of a planning condition, condition 10, on page 43 of your agenda to secure the pedestrian access. The site, together with the Mersey Home site to the west, will contribute to the future viability and sustainability of the village. The application proposes a mix of houses. The application was made following council officer pre-application advice in 2020. The applicant deferred submission of the application to allow the development plan to progress and to work in cooperation and collaboration with Mersey Homes. The application is accompanied by a phase 1 contamination report, arboricultural impact assessment, heritage statement, landscape and visual impact assessment, ecological assessment, planning and design and access statement, and the associated plans. The application is also accompanied by a signed unilateral undertaking providing the council's required community benefits and RAMS payment. As per the officer's recommendation for approval, the proposal therefore accords with the development plan and policy and allocation SS1 of the deposit local plan and the MPPF. Therefore, we respectfully invite the council to grant outline planning permission in accordance with officer's advice and subject to the planning conditions listed on pages 40 to 45 of your agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for attending. Thank you. And now we have visiting councillor, Councillor Kevin Bentley, the county councillor for the area. Councillor, you have 5 minutes. The bell will go after 4.
Well, Chair, thank you, and members, it's good to see you this evening. Yes, and just for the sake of declarations and transparency, I am the leader of Essex County Council, but not here in that capacity tonight. I am the neighbouring borough council to Aberton and Elangho, and indeed I am the county councillor for those villages. And I'm speaking in support of what you've heard already from the chair of the Parish Council, and it's simply to say this, that of course we have village schools, but they're not village schools as we understand them. They are schools in villages where many people are now forced to drive their children, and Aberton and Elangho is exactly one of those situations. You've heard of the disruption some parked cars can have to people living in what is a very small enclosed housing area, and we could, and I'm delighted to hear what I've heard from the agents of the applicants tonight, help resolve that. We need more than 8 car parking spaces. You've heard of the numbers of people that are driving, and while no doubt there'll be younger children coming from these new dwellings, it still will be the majority that will be forced to drive to get to there. Parents have little choice, although I hope in the near future, with the right investment in sustainable transport, that may well change, but it's not here at the moment, so therefore people are having to be forced to drive. Now, I've spoken to the Cabinet Member for Education at Essex County Council, and he was clear with me there's no objection to having a car parking area on the school area, provided, of course, there's no cost to the County Council, but that would be very welcomed if we could do that. And again, I'm delighted to hear what we have done from the agent from the applicants. So therefore, just in closing, I don't want to hold up all of your time, we've heard the arguments, but in closing, the paragraph that talks about all parties working together, I would be keen and pleased if you you to enshrine that as part of the conditions, therefore, if needs be, forcing people to come to the table to discuss this, although it does sound we have willing partners. It is very important when we are looking at new developments, whether it be urban or rural, that we cast our minds to the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, not just this moment in time. If we plan for just this moment in time, we have some of the problems we experience in this borough already. So therefore, there's an ideal opportunity to help mitigate that for Aberton and Elangho, indeed residents in neighbouring villages as well. Members, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. There's been a lot there, and I think that perhaps we'll go straight to questions from councillors, because a lot of questions are going to come up on that. So we'll move straight to the questions of the councillors. If you wish to speak, please indicate. We have Councillor Corey first.
Thank you, Chair. I think development like this in villages is needed to ensure sustainability going forward, and I feel the outline application seems acceptable. However, I think the developer could be contributing more, and I think the comments from the local parish are really helpful. I raised it on a sort of pre-briefing about the crossing, and I felt that an informal crossing perhaps wasn't enough for future-proofing. And actually looking closely at the detail of the application, why the parking has to be on site B, leading to people needing to cross the road, doesn't make sense to me. Now, I'm only subbing this evening, so that sort of getting into the detail of the difference between A and B, I'd need to have that fully explained, whether it's different or being used as the same, so you can interchange the facilities over the two sites. I need to be corrected or not on that one. So for me, I wanted to understand where the footpath to the school would be, whether that can be through site B to the back of the school field, or whether that is around the school and there's an existing footpath that we're already directing people to. I just feel that we can make a much better, sustainable, forward-thinking solution for the school out of this application. It looks like the developer will get a good site and have their profits from this, but I do think we need to look for the next 10, 20 years to ensure the school has adequate parking and the access from that parking is safe. So at worst, I'd like to see that crossing upgraded, because it is a fast road for rural use. And at best, I'd like to see if the parking could be on the site B and that footpath going more directly to the school. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Nadine, would you like to respond, please?
I can try and provide some background information, and I will show you, if I can, the extract again, so that we were all talking about the same thing. So just give me a moment. Okay, so I'm taking you back to... Oh, there we go. I'll take you back to the extract, because that shows the site A, site B, and the primary school. So at the moment, there is proposed to have a car park roughly in this area, then a footway that leads along this stretch of the road, crosses the road with an informal crossing roughly here, because this line here is the public footpath that leads to the school. What came out of discussions with the school is that there's an opportunity for this area of land here to be turned into car parking. But as of today, we've not had it confirmed whether this is possible or not. If it is possible, then the applicant would be willing to provide a financial contribution or to do the works to create car parking spaces in here. No works have been carried out, so we don't know how many parking spaces can go in there. One of the conditions states at least 8, so it could be more, it will have to be at least 8. That number is not based on any evidence or anything, so we would have to do some feasibility studies to find out how many spaces can reasonably go in here, and that would then be instead of the car park here. So if there's no car park here, then there would still be an informal crossing, but parents could park here and it would potentially be, according to local residents, safer for children. Site B has in the policy also a car parking facility that is required, but it also says 5 houses. So the site, it's difficult to say whether the site can take a car park and 5 houses. If it can't, one of the two has to give. At the moment, we've got an application for 5 houses and the car park on the other side, so it technically meets the criteria. What they are proposing is a footway along their northern boundary, which would lead to the playing field of the school. But the school might not be interested in that, because the pupils would have to, at the moment, would have to walk across a grassed area, the playing field. In winter, when it rains, that's not very attractive. So, and also, the school would need to have a caretaker guarding this entrance. So, when we spoke with the school, it wasn't in their interest to have that. So, whilst there are options to provide all of these wonderful things, there may be restrictions from the school because they don't want that, or they haven't got the, again, as Councillor Bentley just said, that they can't have any financial implications. So they haven't got funding for an additional caretaker, then they don't want that access. So Site B includes a condition that requires a footway, a pedestrian link. It's quite loosely worded. We will in the future be able to work with the school and say, do you want that access? If yes, we can provide it. If no, we will look to connect the site along Peldon Road to the existing footway. And the same with Site A now. We've got options. If the preferred options by members is to have the parking in front of the school, then that can be explored. The only thing I would say is if for some reason that can't be done, and that is outside of our control, then the fallback would be the car park on the site, and if it complies with policy, that is considered to be acceptable. The only thing, sorry, one more thing. We shouldn't start linking the two applications together because they're standalone applications. They've got different applicants, different site owners. We are just bringing them at the same time because they have been submitted at the same time.
Councillor Corey.
Thank you, Chair. That does help, the last said, because bringing them together, I saw there seemed like 2 applicants, but I wasn't sure if there was interchangeable infrastructure. So clearly there is not, so that helps. Thank you. However, I would like to see what the rest of the committee feel. I wouldn't want to declare I'm a teacher, but nothing to do with this school. I wouldn't like to see the school land be taken away when actually it should be on the development site. So if school land can also contribute a further 6 or 8 car parking spaces, that should be on top of the provision that is provided on that development site A, is my strong opinion. I think that should be a contribution of site A, and if anything can be provided on top through the school, then that can come through any further 106 agreements or conditions. Thank you.
I think there's a slight issue with that because even though we know there are issues with car parking at the school, this development only needs to mitigate the additional pressure on the school, or any additional pressure on anything it will have an impact on. So it is more than likely that these pupils, you would hope, would walk to the school. So anything they provide is a bonus, but they can't start, the applicants can't be held responsible for existing issues. So anything they provide, whether it's 8 or more than 8, is going to be making things better than it already is. So we can only ask reasonably one or the other.
You happy with that? Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to come back on exactly the same as Mark has there. It is a big concern, and my only concern really is it's a very narrow road and a very quick road. It is the main road to Malden, the main road to Colchester. So, you know, people are doing a rat run through all these little roads now, and we're encouraging them with all the development we're making. So I think we really have to get the best scenario out of both developments, however we can. I know they're different applicants, there'll be different contributions from both. But I'm sure if the school are willing to discuss with the applicants, and if they are good developers, they will want to engage with the school to do the best they can. And I think we should encourage nearer the school for everybody concerned to go into the school, not just the ones that, I mean, we can have the walkway through still, but, you know, if we can have some hard standing at the school, I think would be, you know, far better for everybody, because to cross that road, you're going to need more than just a drop curb. I think that is a very dangerous road for that age of child going to school. I know, you know, they should all be able to cross the road by themselves, but, you know, I wouldn't want mine doing it. So I think we can do better, and we should maybe engage and see what we can do to alleviate that a lot more. That's all I have to say. My biggest concern, and of course the hedges. I expect the hedges will be reduced. Maybe if they're going to be developing, they may take them out. I don't know, but you're going to need some site space along there, so you're going to have to remove some greenery of some sort. But that's my biggest concern, is the crossing.
Nadine?
It was discussed with the school. Obviously with the field, that's not ideal. I don't know whether it's in their interest to lose the grass area and to have that path. Again, they don't want anything that they have to pay for, and the policy says a new pedestrian access route from Peldon Road to the grounds of Elangho Primary School, and I believe that having to do work within the primary school may go beyond the scope of what they have to do. You never know, they might be willing to do it, but I think what they have to do is provide a link to the school, and anything within the school would then potentially be the responsibility of the school, and they don't want to do it. But in the road itself, part of the proposal is to, obviously you have to have visibility displays, so some of the hedging along both sides of the road will come out, which will increase visibility south down Peldon Road, and the speed limit sign is proposed to be relocated further south. So that would mean that vehicles would drive up the road, they would have to enter the 30-mile-per-hour zone earlier, and they would have better visibility towards the informal crossing. So ideally they would, I know at the moment, according to locals, there is higher speeds than there should be, but there are restrictions in place that hopefully that speed will reduce. But I might just at that point try and get Martin Mason to say a few words about the informal crossing, because I think he will be able to explain why it's an informal crossing and nothing more than that.
We've just got to do a microphone check at the moment because we've got a bit of feedback going on. I think it's a good idea to bring Martin in, and there's been some other issues that was brought up earlier by the Parish Council and such. If we could discuss whether a crossing could go in there, proper zebra crossing, or one of the other ones. At the moment, with the 78 cars come visit the school, has there been any issues with the parking around the area, any accidents, or do they all park in the road and drop off there and just go into the school? But if you could go through the issues that Nadine wants as well, it'd be great. Thank you, Martin.
No problem. Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay? So my advice to committee would be that given the number of pedestrians that are likely to be in Peldon Road as a result of this development, versus the amount of traffic that'll be using the road, my advice would be that an informal crossing should be sufficient. As Nadine has touched on, adequate visibility would also be provided, and continuity of a footway in Peldon Road, and also the ability for people to use the public footpath to get through to the school if they so wish. In terms of the dreaded school run, it's a national problem, not specific to this village, and I think we all rue the day really that catchments kind of went out the window and you can send your children anywhere. It's caused a bit of an issue for us in terms of transport sustainability, but it is what it is, and it's a problem that we are looking to tackle and encourage people not to drive to school. I appreciate that it's an existing problem and it's not easy to get around, particularly in a rural area like this. And I can understand the debate as to why there might be a need to provide some more parking space, but actually the County Council would not particularly, my education colleagues would not particularly support that. Their policy and their guidance is around encouraging people to walk and cycle and sustainable transport, national planning policy framework, without wishing to teach you to suck eggs. So that's it in a nutshell. I hope that helps, but of course I'm here to help with any further questions.
It doesn't. As you're on, before bringing Councillor Buston, as you're on, Councillors got any questions for Martin, who's a highways officer, as there? Councillor Corey.
Sorry, Chair. I think we should be encouraging active travel more and more. We've got the leader of the council here. We've talked about it many times. To get a bike across that road, to get people crossing, I think we should be looking to the future and encouraging them to cross at that point. And therefore, would you not say an informal crossing doesn't encourage? So something like an island at least would encourage people, because you want people to cycle, you want to then get them to cross the road, etc. I just think an informal crossing is asking for trouble, and in 10 years' time we'll be asking for more.
I hear what you have to say. My technical expertise advice is that an informal crossing should be sufficient. The other thing to be aware of is the extent of highway in Peldon Road, and it's whether a control crossing or an island is actually physically possible to get that within highway in Peldon Road. The carriageway is actually is relatively narrow, and the extent of highway is constrained, and in a way that's why an informal crossing is sufficient, because the carriageway isn't too wide, and visibility will be good. So I think younger children obviously would be escorted to school in any event, but parents would be afforded the adequate visibility, and then the hope would be that the older children can get themselves to school and can cross the road as anywhere under a 30-mile limit with adequate visibility.
Thank you. Councillor Bustard.
Thank you. I'm just commenting on this particular set of issues that we've introduced here, rather than the other points that I was going to make. Taking up the point that was made about encouraging people to walk and cycle, that's a fine aim. I don't have any difficulty with that. However, we have to recognise reality, and reality is as it is today. And the reality is, as Mr. Chairman, you'll remember, many occasions we've had dealings in relations to schools across the borough. Folks still take their children to school in cars. Perhaps we wish they wouldn't. When I went to school, I didn't. I went on my bicycle, and that was fine. However, we are where we are. We have to recognise this. So to suggest we're not going to provide adequate facility because we want people, or demand that people will walk and cycle, it's like throwing snowballs at the moon. You know, it's not going to work. We need proper and adequate facilities here. So I have to suggest that this is inappropriate, particularly as it was brought to our attention by Mr. Doherty, who I think made some excellent points. 78, I think he said, out of 100 folk at the school came from elsewhere, and that means they're not going to come on foot, they're not going to come on their bicycle, they are going to come in a car. And unless you say, no, you will not bring your child in a car, how are they going to get there? They're not. So let's face reality here, guys. That's not going to work. Thank you, Mr. Doherty, for pointing that out. That's a very salient point. Secondly, I don't agree to an informal crossing. I think that is inappropriate. At the very worst, I would support an on-demand crossing, which I believe is now appropriate, such that if a child bashes the button, then the lights come on and say, now it's safe to cross the road. It's all very well saying, well, it's informally all right, but, you know, I wouldn't like to see an informally dead child because of this. Again, we've got to be realistic about it. It's been noted here that vehicles travel between 39 and 53 miles an hour down that road. Are they going to stop doing that? We hope so. I wouldn't like to put money on it, though, and I don't really think that as a committee it's a responsibility to say, oh, that's all right then, we'll just let that go. So I would support what Councillor Corey has said in relation to crossings. I think he's absolutely right. At the very least, if we've got to have a crossing here, let it be at the very least a demand-controlled crossing. But I'll come on to this later in my other submissions. I don't think that's appropriate either. But neither guy, this is my least worst option. Thank you.
Well, did you want to do those points now? Are they addressed to Martin or to Nadine? Councillor Buston.
I'll come on to my points after we've wrapped up the little bit relating to highways. I think that would be the polite and sensible thing to do.
Okay. Any more questions for Councillor Warnes, please?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask some questions of Martin, if I could. I wanted to talk about the proposed footpath that would connect to the existing prow. When you get up near Will-o'-the-Wisp and to Toad Hall, from the site boundary of Site A, there is no footpath that goes up level with the prow. So if you put a footpath only to the boundary of the actual site, you would have an unfootpathed area on the road that people would either need to walk on the verge, and that may well be highways ground because the earth buttons are set back roughly the width of the road, or it may well be private land. So you would need the footpath extended in order to come opposite the prow. And when you go to use the prow, it's not really an actual desirable. It's not in desirable condition for really children to be used after dark on a winter's day. It's round about maybe a couple of feet wide at the most. It has no hard surface. It is poorly maintained. There are high hedges on to the one side. It is not lit, so you wouldn't want parents and children using that in order to access the school, which is what I understand the school wants, rather than coming onto the school grounds. So in terms of Section 106 money, you would want that improved in order for that to basically be usable. In terms of a crossing, my feeling is that the road hierarchy would probably demand an improvement to the crossing on the Mersey Road before you did on the Peldon Road. Peldon Road is actually an unclassified road, I believe, and the Mersey Road is actually a B-class road. In terms of dissipation of school traffic, I can tell you from experience, through actually watching whilst I'm walking and running around the village, quite a few parents are using the actual village hall car park in order to park and then to go and pick up their children. So they are crossing the actual Mersey Road, which doesn't have a controlled crossing outside of school hours, and the traffic volume is much higher at that point. And also, whilst I support the single access from site B onto the Peldon Roads, because it does maintain the rural nature between the two existing buildings. If you weren't to have an access onto the school grounds for basically people to walk from those 5 houses, they would have to step out onto the Peldon Road. I'm not sure whether it's east or west side, but on the side of area B. And it's difficult to see from the pictures, but when you physically walk down that road, that bend is actually sharper than what it looks in the pictures. And indeed, through walking down there myself on numerous occasions during the lockdown, you have to cross the road over to the other side in order to be able to safely pass. So if you are to leave the existing hedging in place, and I don't believe you will take out enough to actually make it safely visible, you would probably need a footpath on the side of Part B, Site B as well, and that has the same problems as Site A. When you reach the boundary, the two existing houses between Petai House and the Prow do not have an existing footpath. So again, you asking people to either walk over somebody's grass or to actually step out the road. And yes, it is true that cars are picking up speed when they come off of the Aberton Road and heading down to Peldon. And also, my understanding is there are 2 bus routes that are serving that particular village. One comes down the Mersey Road and one comes down to Peldon Road. So there is alternative sustainable transport at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Just, would you like to respond to that, Martin, please?
No problem. Thanks for your questions, Councillor Warnes. I think if I just run through the various points you've made, if that's okay. In terms of providing a crossing, we've obviously talked about there being an informal crossing in Peldon Road to make sure there's an appropriate position where people should cross to get from Site A across the road. You mentioned perhaps having a crossing in Mersey Road instead. I don't think that would be related to the applications. I think what we're trying to do is make sure that we mitigate the impact of the 2 sites in Peldon Road rather than Mersey Road itself. The footpath, the public footpath, not the footway, but the public footpath between Peldon Road and the school site is not being completely relied upon. Certainly at certain times of the year, most footpaths are not particularly suitable to be relied upon to get access to anything really. So I think we wouldn't be happy if the school was reliant on just that footpath. So there is a condition in there to have that improved as part of the scheme in any event. But as I say, we're not relying on that. There will be a new footway provided in Peldon Road. And again, that would form part of the planning permission if you're minded to grant. So that would be that would serve both sites, Peldon Road within highway, and would link to existing footway to the north. So you've got the ability to go that way on a dark, dingy November morning. I can understand why people don't want to use the footpath, but it's certainly there this time of year for people to use. And then I think you also made a point around visibility in Peldon Road, and we're content that sufficient visibility would be provided for pedestrians and vehicles, and whatever hedgerow needs to come out to achieve those visibility displays will have to come out. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Martin.
So I've put the plan up on the screen so you can see the footway. You can see this is the northern boundary of the application site. This is the pedestrian access into the site, and this grey area here is a new footway proposed, and the crossing for this is opposite, directly outside the public footpath. And then it will go further north where it links to the existing footway. And as you said, these 2 houses here do not have a footway, and when the application for the 5 houses site B was considered, we did try to explore the opportunity to provide a footway on this side as well. The verge is not wide enough. There was no opportunity to provide a footway here because in some points it's less than 1 metre wide and it wouldn't have been safe. So that's why the footway is not on this side and is unlikely to be provided.
Chair, could I just have some clarity on something?
Well, before we do that, Simon may be able to. Simon wants to come in, so perhaps he can clarify that for you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just really wanted to add to the point that both Nadine and Martin Mason have made. In particular, we've heard this evening that I think it was 78 out of almost 100 of the pupils come from elsewhere. And I think this is fundamental to your consideration of what is reasonable to request from the developer. As you will know from Section 6 training, we can request the developer to mitigate the impacts of the development, but not to correct existing deficiencies in infrastructure provision. So in terms of this development, it is the pupils arising from the new dwellings and not the existing pupils we are here to serve, sadly. In terms of correcting the impacts, a purposive interpretation of the policy is required. So it needs to be proportionate to the development and to not seek to really address the existing problems that exist within the settlement from the existing levels of usage, in particular the large numbers of pupils that come by car. We discussed the appropriate level of car parking provision that should be provided through this policy, and that needs to be proportionate to the development, not related to the number of children that come from elsewhere out of the parish by car. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. I have Councillor Fox, then there'll be Councillor Manning, and then Councillor Kirby-Taylor. Councillor Fox, please.
Yeah, Chair, I did ask if I could
Yeah, the other councillors have been waiting for some time,
Okay.
and I'll get to your other point to clarify. I'll do that in a minute.
Yeah, it wasn't a separate. It was on the point that Martin, Simon, and Dean were actually answering.
Sure, I'll get to that in a minute. I want to hear from other councillors because they have been waiting some considerable time. Councillor Fox.
Thank you very much, Chair. Martin, I really appreciate what the additional information you provided to us. And we seem to be particularly focusing on the school here, but if we're having 55 additional dwellings in that area, then the pedestrian access to the rest of the village really ought to be of paramount importance for those people accessing other amenities within the village as well. You said that that the uncontrolled crossing is the best option. Is that because you're saying there isn't the space to put a controlled crossing in? Is that ultimately where the issue is here? Because I think there's a difference between saying we think that an uncontrolled crossing is the right crossing and saying that there is no space to have a proper crossing there.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Excuse me. The new footway in Peldon Road would obviously link to existing footways to the north, so people would have the ability to walk into the village from the development. In terms of the informal crossing, I think the point I was making earlier is that an informal crossing is sufficient because the road is quite narrow. We normally look to have an island or maybe a control crossing where the road is wider and therefore more of a constraint, more of a potential perceived hazard for pedestrians. That was the point I was making. It was not, we can't answer that because you can't fit it in. You can't fit one in because actually, perversely, the width of the road is such that an informal crossing is sufficient, especially given the number of pedestrians that are likely to be using it and the amount of traffic. If we were looking at Lexton Road or something like that, it'd be a very different story, wouldn't it?
Thank you. I'll move on now to Councillor Mannion.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just bemused, disappointed, uncomfortable, whatever adjective describes it. But informal crossing doesn't cut it, I don't think. We have a narrow road, albeit, as you say, you can't fit formal crossing on the highway, but we do have a two-way highway with speeding, and whatever you say, it's acknowledged speeding from the Parish Council. They have measured it. We're going to have new people moving into a development on the other side of the road from the school, which I haven't heard anybody mention this as an accountable issue in terms of numbers of people. So I've got the clock going. This is going to be an issue, and we're supposed to be future-proofing. We've alluded to future-proofing. We're not future-proofing. What will happen when the developments on the other side on Site A are built? We have 50% of new young people with children which ultimately go to the school. How do they cross the road? Oh, we've got an informal crossing. That will do. I'm sorry, but no, it won't. As I say, we have a highway, a fast highway, not fast in terms of motor A road, but we have a fast country highway with bad visibility, and here we are talking about, okay, we'll just throw the kids across on an informal crossing. I'm sorry, it doesn't cut it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Kirby-Taylor, please.
Thank you. I was also going to raise the crossing as my issue, but I will defer to your better technical knowledge if you are willing to say, as a specialist, that the informal crossing is the safest option as opposed to simply the most appropriate, and it reduces the risk as far as practicable rather than simply as far as reasonably practicable.
Thank you for your question. Obviously, a key element of our work is highway safety, if not, is paramount. And as a responsible highway authority, it's top priority for us. And we spend an awful lot of time with developers working up a scheme that we are happy is as safe as possible. We can't ever guarantee 100% safety, and people do actually have to look after themselves, as well as we're there to help, obviously. We have quite a process to go through as part of the Section 278 agreement. There are 4 stages of safety audit that we can go through. So we cross every T and dot every I. So highway safety is absolute paramount to us.
Hold on again. Before we take Councillor Willis, Councillor Warnes, would like to ask your point of clarity, please. And who do you want to ask it to?
Martin, please. The point of clarity is that you've said to me that the footpaths being provided from Site A will connect up to the existing footpaths, and therefore people will have access to the village. And you've only got to look at the map that comes with the planning permission to see that the main areas that the development and the pedestrians coming from it may want to connect to is the village hall and children's play area and the village shop, and they are all to the right hand side of the Mersey Road. So, and then you go on to tell me that in terms of the public right-of-way, you are not relying on that as an access into the village because the footpath will connect up to the existing footways. But you can see from the map that if you weren't relying on the Borough and that was not to be upgraded to a safer standard, then people would have to walk an actual U shape in order to get to the Mersey Road, to cross over, to go to the village hall, to go to the play area, to go to the gym equipment, or walk up the Mersey Road past the allotments to get to the shop. Otherwise, they would have to walk all the way up to the Mersey Road, up to the Aberton Road, where they could walk over to the Mersey Road at the Aberton car sale to get to the shop, but to get to the village hall and to get to the other public facilities, they would then have to walk down the road again. Now, we know from various applications that we've dealt with, people will take the nearest desire line to get where they want to get to, and that will be through the public right of way, which, as I've said at the moment, is just a grass track through 2/3 of it. So as far as Site B goes, if you're not providing a pedestrian access from that site through to the school, then you're effectively asking people, because of the visibility, to cross the road once, to walk a short way up the road, to cross it again. People aren't going to do that. They're just going to walk up the road. So whilst I understand there is a policy and technical way of looking at what is the minimum needed in order to actually mitigate, common sense tells you that really that pram needs to be brought up to footway standard, and the issue, should there be no access into the school for the 5 houses on Site B, then it's impractical to expect them to cross the road once in order to actually cross it again. And even if you do provide a public access into the school for people on foot from Sloppy, the school is gated. So there's nothing to say that access into the village won't be closed off, because it will be in the power of the school to actually do that. And would they potentially want any pedestrians walking onto school grounds during the hours that the school is actually open? Probably not.
I'll leave Nadine to clarify the issues you've raised around access to the school directly from Site B, because it's none of the Highway Authority's business. So that's a planning matter, not something that not something for us to consider. But I think I mentioned earlier that there's a proposed planning condition to improve the prow between Peldon Road and through to the school. Perhaps Nadine, if you can help me with that as well, that would be useful. But I'm not sure I can add much more to what I said earlier, really. With an improved prow, obviously that expands, hopefully, the number of days in a year that it can be used, if you've got a better surface. But ultimately, there's an existing arrangement for the local people that live there at the moment that have to walk the U-bend to get round to the school, or use the prow at certain times of the year. And I think we're looking to build on that by providing a footway to serve this new development and improve the prow through to the school. Nadine, you can help me in terms of the condition that you're proposing, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Condition 28 of Site A states that the surfacing improvements shall have been made to the public right-of-way footpath number 7, the details of which shall have previously been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority, and shall include but not be limited to the cutting back and removal of vegetation to improve the width, the appropriate construction surfacing to provide an all-weather surface. So ideally it should become wider, because vegetation either side of the footpath would have been removed, and the surface will be better to walk on. That is a condition. And again, that makes it, that is really, again, to mitigate the impact of the development, because it is expected that more people, those who will move into development, will use that footpath. That's how we can justify that. The two sites require different footpaths, links to the existing footway network. So Site A requires the provision of new public footpaths to the north of the site connecting to the school and village, which should provide. And Site B requires a new pedestrian access route from Peldon Road to the grounds of Elangho Primary School. So if the footway from Site B to the school were to come forward, that's not for public use, that is for the school. So yes, that of course that will be closed when the school is not open, because that is simply to provide access to the school.
Yes, Chair. So it still leaves the issue that outside of school hours, we are asking pedestrians to cross the road once in order to cross twice in order to get to the prow, and it still leaves the issue that during the winter months, the prow, which will be principally used for homes from Site B that have school children to get to the school, will basically not be lit during the hours of darkness.
Would you like to come back on that? Was it just was that a question or a statement?
Well, I mean, Nadine read out the condition, but the condition does not mention lighting.
I don't think that lighting would be reasonable to be required, because improvements will be made to the footpath, and there is school pickup is roughly 3:15 in the afternoon, and yes, in the winter months it will get darker, but it's not pitch black. And there is a way, which yes is a longer way, but it adds a minute or two to the route. So if someone is that worried, there is an alternative option, a safe option that is already there. I don't think this development, this application warrants the lighting of the footpath.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Willans, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We effectively have one shot at getting this right and ensuring that we put into the conditions whatever is necessary to ensure that the developers contribute and provide the right crossing at the Peldon Road location. So I think we have to fully understand and be convinced that we are doing the right thing if we settle for an informal crossing rather than some semi-formal or even a full pedestrian crossing. So the question I ask is, given that on sustainable transport, we're always asking the question, what will it be like and what do we wish to achieve in 10, 15, 20 years' time, as was stated earlier on. Just what are the objective criteria for providing different types of crossing at this location? Because I'm sure we have to anticipate not what is there today and how many people are crossing the road today, but what will it be like in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, how many people will be crossing, and of course there will be further development, I expect, further south down Peldon Road in the course of time. So what are the objective criteria? What are the numbers that are being taken into account in saying that there is only a necessity for an informal crossing? Is that done on the basis of what we see today or what we see in 5 years' time, or anticipate be there in 5 years' time or 10 years' time? And just what numbers do we need to look at this evening to convince ourselves that an informal crossing is acceptable and a pedestrian crossing is not needed? Or will a pedestrian crossing, proper pedestrian crossing, meet whatever the PV squared guidance might be over the course of the next 5 years? We have these objective statistics being taken into account in the advice that we're getting this evening.
Councillor Willits, I'm very impressed with you mentioning PV squared. That's a very technical document, and if you suffer with insomnia, it's a good read. But that is one of the ways that we assess the need for what type of crossing is required in what location, because it's a very techie way of working out what the relationship is between the demand for crossing and the demand for traffic. So that is one tool that we use, but we treat each site in its own merits. Obviously, we've got vast amounts of information that we hold as a highway authority in terms of our own network. And also vast experience within the strategic development team, having dealt with hundreds of thousands of planning applications, and so there's an element of judgment in there as well, absolutely, and we normally get it right without wanting to blow our own trumpet. And I wouldn't be here tonight giving you my advice if I wasn't completely 100% happy with it. As I said earlier, highway safety is absolutely paramount to us. We're certainly not going to be promoting or supporting a proposal and the mitigation behind it if we think it's unsafe. I'm not prepared to put my name to that. I'm only happy to sign something which I'm absolutely convinced is safe, and I'm happy to advise you on that basis.
Chairman, can I repeat the question? We want to know what are the objective criteria, not the subjective. I've been looked at it and it seems okay, and an informal crossing will be okay. I mean, I think as a planning committee we should get better information. You know, I'm sure that sort of thousands of planning applications are considered by highways each year, and I'm sure they do it well. But in this case, you know, I feel that we require further information from highways about what modelling has gone on, what traffic levels we will be seeing in 5 years' time, what number of people crossing this road will be, and just how that is tracked into an objective analysis of whether a crossing will be provided, rather than just down the road and it looks okay, and perhaps an informal crossing will be okay, and then in 5 years' time we'll be battling through the local highway panel trying to upgrade it to what should have been done in the first place by putting conditions in this evening to make sure there's appropriate finance to do what is a long-term solution in sustainable travel rather than the minimum we can get away with to get this particular application through this evening.
It goes back to what I said earlier. It's the technical document is the PV squared calculation, and if that was to be conducted on this occasion, I can almost guarantee the outcome would be that there would not be sufficient pedestrians to demand, certainly not a controlled crossing, because that's what it works out. It works out whether it should be a controlled or an uncontrolled crossing, and I'm pretty sure it would come back and say that there's not sufficient demand for crossing to justify a controlled crossing. And also we require stage 1 safety audit to be provided at the planning stage, and a response to that from the designers. And as I touched on earlier, as part of the section 278 process, there are 4 stages of safety audit that we go through. In terms of the future, 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead, absolutely that's what we base our judgment upon, is how many houses are being proposed, what type of houses, linked to the local facilities and the schools, family homes, and we have to think very carefully about how those people are going to be able to walk and cycle. It's a clear government and local policy now, isn't it, to encourage walking and cycling. So yeah, I'm not sure I can say much more really, that other than we do consider all these matters very, very carefully before we provide our advice.
Can I just ask you, if a developer was to offer to pay for a crosser to be placed in there, and he would agree to that as part of it, would the highways then say yes, but would they still need to go through all of the rules and regulations of safety rules, but would they actually allow that to happen without the evidence that you need?
We'd still have to go through the technical process, yes, because the last we want is to have an inappropriate type of crossing in a certain location, because, for example, we're often asked for a zebra crossing to go in, and we have to be so careful with where they're introduced, because they can actually lead to a problem, an accident problem, if you've not got enough pedestrians using the zebra crossing. So that's my example. So yeah, we'd still have to go through quite a technical process before we agree to whether that's appropriate or necessary.
Okay, because I think that all the councillors here tonight can see this coming in 10 years' time. We'll be appearing at the highways panel and asking them for exactly that, and it'll be a shame really, because if there are incidents of accidents that we need to change that in the future, it'll be a shame that with hindsight we could have prevented all of that in a meeting tonight. But I've got a few more people. I've got Councillor Corey and then Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, we provide the human element to planning. That's what we're here for. And I don't think any of us are arguing against a site for 50 dwellings and a site B as well. We can understand that that's going ahead, and I think the parish councillors understand development in that way. But we're here to provide the human angle, and we want to accept an application and put in place what we feel would be the safe and quite honestly acceptable to us parts of this development. So I think that we're coming to a conclusion here that, sorry, sod P squared, we want to make something safe, and we want to have a development that is acceptable to the locality. We are the local councillors for Colchester, and I think that's what we're suggesting. We'd like to see something incorporated. I wanted to ask a couple of questions. One is, are the verges along the, I believe it's the western side, on the side of site A, are there going to be, is there going to be a take to enable the highway for the footpath to go? So are we going to be purchasing parts of the front verge? No, we're using just the verge that, because with Google Maps, we can all take a look whilst talking at it, and it's a very, very thin verge, so it would be a very small footpath. So therefore, if there's not going to be a take of the verge, it will be a small footpath. Can we not go back and look at this further? We may need to suggest a deferral, Chairman, because if we've got Site A and Site B, we're going to have an entrance to Site A and an entrance to Site B. Why can't there be a crossing there? And then that will link to a footpath that goes through to the school. So for school time, that can be used for access to the school, making a big enough space at the entrance to Site A and Site B, or as part of Site A and Part B. We have all the width we need because there's two developments coming forward, two blank canvases where we can build a decent crossing. Then we can still go for the footpath that goes further up to attach to the footpath, thanks for your local guidance today, Martin, where we can ensure that others who want to come from that development to walk into town can use that footpath. And I'm really pleased to see that condition in there to make it useful for anyone who's less able, because again, looking on Google Maps, we get to see the current state that it's in. So I would suggest if we could go back to, I'm accepting of this A and B, but I'd like to see conditions. I'd like to see actually, do we defer it back to officers to get Site A and Site B to work together, where we find space for a crossing to link the two sites, to then link the footpath to the school. We deal with the school access problem, and then we go with the proposed footpath linking to the other footpath. It's narrow, and we can accept an informal crossing there, because that's not where the school kids are going to go. The school kids will go from Site A to Site B. If that needs to be deferred and delegated to officers, I'd be happy to propose that. I'd also be happy to propose a deferral in order for this to come back once all of those discussions have been linked up. We've talked about future-proofing this site. What's the point in allowing it to go through in a muddle and it perhaps never to be sorted? Let's get it right now. That's probably, I don't want to repeat myself.
Yeah. I think that, I think I have to agree with everything you've said just then, and a deferral, is that a proposal for a deferral? But are we talking about Site A, if we can have a clarity here about Site A and Site B, because there are two different situations.
Sorry, Chair, because they come together, they're so inextricably linked. Yep. If we can get a crossing between A and B, for example, I'd defer to hear what officers have to say before I make that clear proposal, because it could be that we defer and delegate and officers can deal with it, or we defer and actually ask them all to talk to get a guarantee out of the school and everything, so we have a link between A and B and to the school, because that will satisfy our concerns about kids crossing. Then we can accept others will use the footpath to connect to the other footpath from Site A.
Officers, can we do that?
There is a provision for those sites to be linked. So Site A has, you're not going to like this, has a dropped curb, and Site B is willing to provide the dropped curb as well. So there will be another informal crossing there. So there is scope that it is proposed to have that linked. Unfortunately, the battery on my laptop died, but so there's a link that would pedestrians could cross Site A directly into Site B and could then go to school. And from the plan that has been submitted, all of the footways will be provided in highway land. So that should be that does need to be any purchasing of land. And I believe in some areas it might not be as wide as it ideally should be, but it's as wide as it can be. And again, it's better than nothing. At the moment, they have to walk on verges. So Site A does have to provide the connectivity to the footway network to the north, so that will have to come. But they've already made provision to go to Site B as well.
Okay, thank you. I think Simon's going to come, but could I say, it's a development of 50 dwellings. Can we not get a decent crossing out of that to cross to Site B?
Simon, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think I have a question for Martin Mason, and I think it goes to the fundamental point. Would a formalised crossing between Sites A and B be a safe option that the Highway Authority would support in any event?
A bit on the spot. I'm not really able to answer that question without having seen an awful information. I'd need to see a drawing, a safety audit, designer's response, PV squared, all the technical stuff I've touched on already, before I'm able to commit to whether a control crossing would be safe, appropriate, necessary, etc. The footway that's proposed is within highway, and it does connect to footway to the north and the public footpath. And Nadine has just explained that there is the ability to walk. Am I right, Nadine, in saying walk between site A and B and then potentially into the school site? I'm not able to offer any more advice this evening, councillors, in terms of what type of crossing I think should be provided, or what's been proposed is whether it's adequate or not. I think it is, given the number of pedestrians and the number of vehicles that are likely to be on the road.
Okay, we'll take a few more councillors before I come in. Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chair. I think we're talking potentially we could have an extra 100 children crossing this road. So we have got to be mindful, we've got to be proactive and not reactive. You know, I really do feel they deserve everything we can do for the safety of this development, for them going to school, which is what they're all going to need. I think we should defer it. We need to really explore this to really get the best out of the development. We're always cutting ourselves short because we're told we're out of time, we're out of this, and there's always technical issues. I think, you know, we really must think this through, because so often we put stuff through and we're so disappointed at the end. So let's try and just do the job right, and be right for the school and the children. The children are the main, priority here. And it is a family development. It's a family village, and it's a very busy village, and the roads are very busy. So I think, the signage needs to go in. There's also, we need to be really sort of giving it everything we can for the safety of the children.
Well, I guess I have to agree with you on that, and we've got a few more councillors to come up. So what I'll do is I'll take Councillor Willets and then Councillor Manning, who put their other hands up, and Councillor Fox, because I did miss him. But then we really must need to move on, and I believe that Councillor deference sense proposed quite good. But if highways needs all the evidence, if we need the evidence from highways and highways need to do a proper look at it, then we should ask highways to look at it completely, compile all the evidence. We want the crossing in there because we know it's going to come back in a few years' time. We can work from there. So, Councillor Bust.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's now 7:30. We've spent an hour and a half dancing around the head of a pin here, and I find it rather bizarre. I looked at these two applications. They've been lumped together, and I think quite sensibly, because they need to be considered all separately in the same light, because they actually have an impact. We also have a third-party player here in regard to the school, and that's been alluded to on a number of occasions, both in relation to the number of people that turn up there by car, and secondly, the number of kiddies that are likely to come from this new development and need to access it. It seems to me, looking at it simplistically, that we have a golden opportunity here, a coalition of the willing, if you like, to do something really good for this village. And that has been highlighted by the presentations from the Chairman of the Parish Council, Simon Doherty, and by Kevin Bentley, who came to speak to us in relation to it. And I think we must pay due heed to this. What we've got, however, frankly, is a dog's breakfast. We're all going round and round and round talking about, are we going to have an informal crossing until a few kids are killed, then perhaps we'll have another one. Well, hang on. We've got an opportunity here, if the developers and the school are willing, to reconsider this. We could come out of this with something really, really good. I cannot see, and going back to my earlier references to discussions I had years and years ago with the chairman, why we cannot have provided within the school, who seem to be willing, a turnaround facility whereby people who will drive their cars to their school with their children cannot have it on the school site. That's the safest option I've ever come across in any ward in the town. And I've seen it where it happens, and I've seen where it doesn't happen. We have an opportunity here to do that. In order to do that, I would fully support what Councillor Corey has to say, that the matter be deferred, and frankly we ask all the people in the situation to go away and think again. We have an opportunity to do something really well. Nonetheless, taking Simon's point and the point that he really makes, we can only consider what we have in front of us. We can't go and rewrite what people want to do, possibly sadly. However, nonetheless, we need to give them the opportunity to do that, because this committee, clearly, from what everyone has said, in regard to the members of it anyway, we are not happy. We are not satisfied with this. We can all see the possibility of a really, really good development here being turned into a dog's breakfast. And we don't want that. We want it to be really good. And if the people are willing to do that, I think we should give them the opportunity to go away and try and come up with a plan like that that would be suitable. I'm not willing to accept, frankly, a situation where there is an uncontrolled thing at the end of the day. I think it's too dangerous. I don't think we should be playing fast and loose with folks' lives. I defer to your technical knowledge and pi r squared and all the other marvellous things, but just look at the pictures. A picture tells 1,000 stories. Kiddies are going to get run over. And it's no good saying to a parent of a grieving parent, well, oh, no, the plans, they said it was fine. So how I know? I don't want to be responsible for that. And I don't think any members around this table want to be responsible for that. When we have an opportunity to do something better, I think the people of this village deserve better than what's currently on offer, which bluntly is a dog's breakfast. And I would support a motion that this be deferred and the parties involved go away and think again if they are willing to do that. I accept if they're not willing to do that, then we just have to deal with what's on the table, in which case I will vote against it. I can't accept it as it is. I think it's dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you. And as a matter of procedure, because one member of the committee has left, we now have to stop procedures because all members of the committee have to listen to all arguments here. So we'll have to wait for Councillor Corey to come back before we start the debate again, I'm afraid. Does everybody want a comfort break for 10 minutes and then we'll come back? No, so we're going to have to wait until Councillor Corey comes back. Sorry, that's procedures for it. 3 more councillors, and then we'll finish and go back to Councillor Corey. So, Councillor Mannion.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, everybody's probably talked me out, actually. All I was really going to say was that I'm happy to support Councillor Corey's proposal if it is actually a...
Oh, it's not quite there, but I'll take on board. We'll come back to you on that one. Councillor Kirby-Taylor. Sorry, Councillor Fox. I keep forgetting the group leader. That's a terrible thing.
Thanks very much, Chair. So I would support Councillor Corey's proposal as well. But one of the things I was going to ask was about because I think it's one thing about saying we'll provide a safe crossing. I think it's another thing about saying how are we making this road safe and reducing the danger on it. And I think one of those things is about the shift of the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. If there's anything else that could be done at that end of the development, whether that's signage, a chicane, or some other form of a speed reduction, you know, that could also look at that as well. That was my point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Oh, you don't want to speak at all now?
I was, but it's now been answered.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we've had a really good discussion. Councillor Willett, so I beg your pardon. I did have your name down as well.
Oh, I thought I caught your eye, Chairman. I mean, the question is not can a crossing be made safe at this location. The question is can a crossing be made safe at an affordable cost at this location? Because unless it's a really difficult road, it can always be made safe. It's just how much does it cost in terms of using extra land or having to make other changes to the development. So what I see the decision we have to make this evening, and I certainly support deferring it, is whether the cost of a full crossing, which clearly many colleagues wish to see at this location, would be willingly paid for by the developers of 55 houses, or whether if we were to include a condition that we wanted a control crossing of some description, and whether that might lead to an appeal against our decision, against our conditions, and possibly losing the day. I think on balance, we should be asking for a control crossing. We should be asking the developers whether they are happy to pay the extra cost, because we know at this stage of a development where it's outlined, we don't even have the detailed plans, the cost of providing a controlled pedestrian crossing is relatively small, whereas as soon as it gets built and walls are there and boundaries would have to be moved, the cost gets astronomical. So I think it is well worth the risk at the moment of deferring and finding out how much a controlled crossing would cost and seeing whether the developers are prepared to accept a Section 106 condition, or whatever the condition is, the highways condition, to provide this crossing as part of the development, so that we get the best possible, safest crossing at the minimum cost as part of this planning consent.
Okay, Nadine.
Thank you. Seeing how the discussions have gone, I think Councillor Willett has just kind of summarised that in a very, very good way. The technical data that were to be collected, that's not the job of the Highway Authority. It would need to be the applicant for Site A doing that. So I think the deferral is probably the best option in this instance, because at the moment we don't know whether the applicant is willing to do that. So that would be my suggestion, to defer it for that reason. And then if and when we come back to committee, we can either say, yes, they've done it and this is the outcome, and then you'll have to make a decision on the additional information that has been collated. If they don't want to do it, we'll bring it back and you make a decision then. And we'll see how it goes. I would like to answer Councillor Fox's questions about the speed sign. So it is proposed to relocate that further south, and it was also discussed to have a feature, kind of like a village gateway, just to emphasise that you are now entering a village. If you're asking for a formal crossing and all of these other things that we've already asked for, I think it goes too far to make the development pay for that. So that's something that the parish council could look into if they wanted to do that. That would be my suggestion. Is if we ask for a formal crossing, a sign, the sign being relocated, and an arch or anything else, that just is no longer proportionate. So I would like to inform the parish council that if they wanted to do that, that is something they could look into to make it clear that you enter a village, and ask drivers to reduce the speed.
Jackie McLean,
Just quickly, I mean, if you want a new entrance made for a premises, the highways normally ask you to ask for the car movements and the speed movements. Can we not put something like that on the road, or somebody could? That's at very little cost to the applicant, I think. It's not a huge amount of money. And then that way we can actually find out what does happen on that road.
Could we have on momentum, please, Jill? Well, yes, it's there's a good point. It'd be nice. We'll have to. I think those points will have to be taken on board when we do it. So I think we're ready to move on now. Simon wants to come in. I'm never going to get to this.
Just
point.
very quickly, Chairman. Just we seem to me we've had 4 points raised by members. The first, Councillor Buston raised the issue of whether a turning area and drop-off point could be provided within the school grounds. The other is a crossing point between sites A and B, and whether that's controlled and at an affordable cost in terms of provision. I think there's a further point around the provision from site B of a possible footway to link with the public right-of-way. And then there's a further point around the traffic calming measures and proportionality. So there's sort of 4 strands there potentially to your deferral, and it'd be useful to have clarity on the full extent of the matters you wish us to investigate on the highway side of things. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so
Chair,
I know, it's a devil, isn't it? It was one of the delights of being chairman. You nearly got... I wouldn't be happy, Mr. Chairman, with the deferral simply on the grounds of the crossing. I think the school, as Simon has very kindly included in his notes, I think the school access and the school turning and parking facilities need to be part of this deferral whilst we have an opportunity to do that. And I would support a deferral called for on that basis with all of those items in it. Thank you.
I think, and we did agree years ago, but the turn circles is a good place to come in, turn around, drop off, then disappear out again. They should be considered in those in the consideration. So, Councillor Corey, is there a proposal that you would like to make?
Yes, thank you. And I was going to try and sum up, so thanks, Simon, for doing that. I'd like to say that at a minimum we stipulate the provision of a crossing. I wouldn't put in there, it has to be provided with this development. That's what we've all come to the conclusion of. So I think that's really clear. I think we have to stipulate it's a safe crossing to provide for younger people active travel to be encouraged. I don't want it to be whether it meets this requirement, that requirement, this cost. We believe that is part of what this development should. It's a substantial development of 50 dwellings. I think it should be delivering these standards as a minimum. So Simon has outlined all those different parts to it, including, as Roger has indicated, about the school as well. And I think it should be the linkage between A and B and the school should absolutely be there as a minimum as well. So I think we've outlined some of the minimums that we'd like to see, and there were some extras in that list of 4 as well. So on that basis, I propose with those 4 outlined conditions mentioned by Simon to be discussed between the developers, the highways and the school, and that's what I propose for deferral.
And that is for side A and for side B?
For both site A and site B, because they're inextricably linked. And I'll thank the officers. I know it's been difficult tonight. You're dealing with an outline plan, not a detailed plan. Sorry to have been so cantankerous, but I think we've got there in the end, so thank you.
So do I have a second for that? Jackie McLean, Councillor McLean. So you have to be quicker putting your hand up there. So colleagues, it has been a lengthy process, and like everyone has said, that we need to get it right from the start. It's a great opportunity to do that. I think everyone's in agreement with the application. It just needs a little tweaking of the safety one. So there, we have a proposal from Councillor Corey, seconded from Councillor McLean. All those in favour of Councillor Corey?
That is unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. That is unanimous, and I believe that is the conclusion for tonight's meeting. Thank you everybody for turning up tonight. Martin Mason, especially. It's good to have a highways officer here so we can grill you. And thanks to the member of the public as well for turning up. Thanks everyone.